Good evening, my friends, co-workers and colleagues in the quest for justice after celebrating Troca's 40 years of striving for justice in the world. About 12 years ago, I boarded a tiny little plane in the far north of Kenya at the United Nations forward base at Lokichokio for a 3.5-hour flight to the remote Nuba Mountains, landing on a dirt airstrip and immediately realizing that this was probably one of the most underdeveloped areas in the entire world. No roads, nothing. So a 4x4 Land Cruiser took us to the Holy Cross parish compound in Kauda. Very simple, impoverished. But the next morning I sat under a tree with a very simple shrine, a cross in a round area of concrete and stone. Inside that little area were pieces of shrapnel. I sat there at a scene which marked a tragedy which had occurred 2 years before my visit. The radical regime in Khartoum, the Bashir regime, in its single-minded attempt to subjugate the South, had embarked on the infamous bombing campaign, sending Antonov transport planes low over the villages, and crude barrels of explosive and shrapnel were rolled down the ramp at the back of the transport plane onto the innocent, unsuspecting villagers below. And one morning, the Catholic school there, the teachers and their learners were sitting under the trees in the tremendous heat in the shade. And one of the Antonov planes flew low over the parish compound, over the church, and dropped 3 barrels of explosive. One hit next to a tree where I was sitting, and 14 children and their teacher were slaughtered. And after the period of mourning, the whole community went up the hill at the back of the parish compound and began to build their little school again. Mud brick, grass roofs to camouflage the school against the bombers, and then began again their education project. I sat in the teacher's staff room made out of reeds, and I saw on the wall the breakdown of the kiddies, nearly half of whom had been orphaned by the war. There were 11 teachers. Only one of them was qualified, a young woman. The Bashir regime was trying to force the Arabization of the South by forcing schools, including the Catholic schools, to teach in Arabic. This school, the community had decided that in the quest for freedom and liberation and human dignity, they would teach their kids in English to give them a future. And immediately I felt the bond between those people and the struggle of my own people in Soweto in 1976, who protested against the forced imposition of Afrikaans and inferior education on the black people of South Africa. I went into one of the classes pitifully resourced, and I asked a little girl, "What do you want to be when you finish your school?" And she said to me immediately, "I want to be a doctor." And I said, "Why?" And she said to me, "Because so many people have died here. So many people are sick. So many people have been injured in the war. There are so many orphans. I want to care for my people. A story which captures what Trokra is about, and a story which captures what we have been celebrating and reflecting upon today. Because the systemic justice issues in our world, which make tragedies like that happen, are multiform, complex, and all-pervasive. What we did in terms of the church communities, ecumenical church communities, their NGO partners and activists in Sudan was to embark on a campaign where every such atrocity was meticulously documented, cross-checked, and then our advocacy people began to engage with the governments of the world, particularly the big powers engaged in the so-called comprehensive peace agreement process, United States, Norway, UK, and so on, to bring pressure on the Bashir government to stop this appalling bombing campaign. And eventually, we succeeded. That was followed by a huge conference in London in which the theme was adopted, "Let my people choose," which was then built into the comprehensive peace agreement in Naivasha, which led to the independence of South Sudan. Advocacy, sadly, so short-lived. The bombing campaign is in its full flight at the moment in South Kordofan, all over the Nuba Mountains area yet again. The international community, particularly in the United States, have grown weary. It's very difficult to transform, yet again, infamous injustices which break the heart and spirit and the future of the little ones of our world. That is why Trokra exists and why we are part of a huge effort around the world, all of us, to make this world a place where we can truly celebrate with our little ones real freedom, real hope, and a future which will correspond to their dignity. We saw on the slides, we all know the story of Trokra, the tremendous campaigns in which they've been engaged in for all these 40 years. For this, we, all of us, salute them, the staff that's gone before us today, the present staff, the excellent analysis, research, strategizing, strategic plans and partnerships which they have throughout the world, which have made such a difference. That is what we celebrate today, all of us. We give thanks to God, but we above all acknowledge the tremendous passion and commitment of these very special people under the leadership of Justin and all those who've gone before. We acknowledge this, we praise them, but above all, we do not want this to in any way be diminished in spite of the challenges. And that is what we have been listening to today. The complexity of the world 40 years after Trokra began in a very different socio-economic political context. The complexity which has required and will continue to require analysis, research, visioning, imagination, creative reflection, and above all, passionate commitment that the difference can be made with the little ones of the world, in real partnership with the little ones of the world. And so at the basis of all that Trokra has done, and at the basis of all we've reflected upon today, is that very human starting point that we encounter each other around the world as sisters and brothers made in the image of God, who have a unique story and experience to share as heart and mind and spirit encounter each other in reverence and respect. The listening which begins the possibility of a relationship which leads on to creative thinking and the agenda set by the little ones who are our partners, and which we then creatively imagine in terms of sharing, empowerment, solidarity, and bringing their resources into communion with whatever we can offer in solidarity and support. The complexity of what we've engaged in our discussions today must never dishearten us. We might not yet have the answers as we look at the post-MDG era, but we can see the directions that we need to follow. And that has become very clear today. And it gives Trócaire, I think, every reason to believe that their mission and their ministry on the world stage, with the support of the people of Ireland in particular, and the government of Ireland, and the support of their partners around the world, that mission and ministry is as relevant today and will be as relevant in the future as it has always been. We have pointed throughout this day to key values, to key principles which must underpin whatever action we take in the future. And because whatever our higher power is, whether it be the Christian God or people who sense within their own spirit that there's a power in me which enables me to transcend every human failure and weakness for the greater good of my sisters and brothers everywhere, that power is going to underpin as well the power of the God we believe in, will underpin Trócaire's onward journey. And the onward journey is that this poverty and misery and injustice and abuse of human rights and atrocities everywhere will be transformed into what makes for sustainable peace as the basis for real human and community development. And one of the critical areas, I think, that Trócaire has encountered, and perhaps which might not have been explicitly articulated today, is the profound need for restorative justice at the heart and at the basis of all development work. Restorative justice, not retributive justice which seeks just to punish, but the restorative justice which articulates and builds the values of healing, of potential reconciliation, of bringing people who have been at war and conflict together again to find each other as brothers and sisters and to commit to each other and to their community to follow a path now that will not only ensure a sustainable peace, but the growth in the quality of life of every single affected and broken person. Restorative justice is a critical area as the foundation for all sustainable development. They go together. And that, I think, is what I took out of the whole of today. Every facet that was focused upon by speakers and by the discussion linked together. It's a wholesome and a holistic vision that we've articulated and shared today. We've begun a journey having celebrated 40 years, and I'm sure every one of us today not only deeply appreciates and thanks Trócaire for the witness, the prophetic witness and engagement which is there for all to see and to be touched by. We not only thank and appreciate them, but we wish them strength, courage, to continue to be prophetic, even when this sometimes makes it difficult for them, but also sometimes simply uncovers the complexity of the issues they deal with and how to deal with this creatively and constructively. So I would just like to end my few reflections by words that you will find in the last 2 pages of Nelson Mandela's autobiography, A Long Walk to Freedom. Beautiful, those last 2 pages. But one thing that captured me was his own sense that I've come this far, but there's so much further to go. He said, some people will say that we've attained freedom. But he said, I realize that all I've attained is the freedom to be free. So much still remains to be done. Trokra, I believe, knows that in their heart and spirit, and is passionately committed to discover what that long walk to real freedom, sustainable peace, sustainable and ongoing development, which will bring about true dignity, freedom, and a life of quality for the poor and the little ones of the world. We wish you well, and truly may you celebrate another 40 years of this marvelous mission and ministry. Thank you.